Thank you very much. Great crowd. Last night this place slept 200. I want to tell you, two guys driving down the street. They've been drinking since like March, April, and it's October. Guy comes up to a red light, goes shooting right through. His buddy says, "Are you crazy? There was a red light. You just went through. You're going to get us killed." I said, "Don't worry about it. My brother does it all the time." They come up to another red light. Guy goes shooting right through again. His friend says, "Listen, I was in the mood too. You're going to get us killed." Just don't worry about it. My brother does it all the time. They come up to a green light. The guy hits the brakes. His friend says, "The light is green. You can go. The light is green." He says, "Are you crazy? You never know when my brother will be coming through the other way." Love that one.
We think of cars as being, fairly solid. That there's lots of metal, that there's lots of steel in it. It's a fairly solid thing. But one of the things that I try to tell people that a car will fold up much the same as if you take a sheet of tin foil and fold it up. And if you ever taken a piece of tin foil and crumpled it in your hands into a ball, so to speak, and then tried to unwrap it, you know how hard it is to do. So our job as firefighters is more or less to take that piece of tinfoil, take the car, and unwrap it, bend it back, cut it away in such a way that we're left with that opening that's large enough to get someone out of that vehicle.
We were at our cottage. Jeff was staying at home as he had elected to work that summer. He was going to go on to university. And we were awakened 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning by a boat coming to our dock. And we knew there was trouble then.
It was Monday, July 21st, 1981. Jeff was working that summer as an assistant manager at a restaurant in Canada's Wonderland. He'd been on night shift, was on his way home just after midnight. Fate would have it that he chose to come home by Highway 400 that night. And just below number 7 highway, he was hit head-on and killed instantly by a car that was going north in the southbound lanes.
Apparently the other driver had got on to 400. As far as we can understand it, Finch Avenue had traveled several miles north in the southbound lanes before the accident occurred.
I think that day there was sort of a numbness and a feeling that, oh, we're just walking through something. It isn't really happening. Till we went to the hospital. And the 4 of us were taken to the morgue. We stood there holding hands. And we saw what had really happened.
Since that time, it has come out that he had been out celebrating a promotion at his job. We understand with his boss and with his friends, and they'd started time in the afternoon, and they'd been drinking. They'd had dinner, and they'd been drinking some more, and the accident occurred at midnight when he'd been trying to get home.
Those people let him get into a car and drive away. His blood alcohol count was 240 milligrams. They were with him when he left.
When I passed McGowan Avenue, I looked under my side rear mirror. I seen a car on the passing lane. I was driving in the curb lane. All of a sudden, a car pulled out in front of it, and I seen the car parked. I knew, looking at my side view mirror, there's a car on the passing lane. I immediately slammed on my brakes. And I skidded. I seen kids running. And I knew one was behind the behind the car. I knew I couldn't stop. I hit him.
Several years ago, when I was still actively involved on a municipal fire department, we got called out early one Saturday morning, just up the road from the fire hall. Motor vehicle accident, people trapped. And as soon as we rolled out of the fire station, we could look up the road and see the accident. And when we arrived on the scene, there was a truck that was virtually inside the car that it had hit. And inside that car was a mother who was taking her son, I believe it was, to a soccer game or a soccer practice. And the car was totally caved in on top of them, as was the front of this truck. Not too many minutes after we had opened the car up and got both the mother and son out, and they had been taken off to the hospital, there was a man come up behind me and said, "Where are the people that are in that car?" And I said, "Well, they've been taken to the hospital." And he said, "Well, how are they?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. That'll be determined at the accident." I said, "Why do you care? Like, what business is it of yours?" He said, "Well, that's my wife's car. And they just left a few minutes ago to go to the soccer game, and I was coming along behind." And the thing that I remember about that is that he never ever had to see his wife and son in the condition or in the position that we see them on a day-to-day basis. I was glad that he was that few extra minutes behind, and they in fact had been taken out of the car and were not for them for him to see.
I immediately jumped out of the car, went to his aid. I kneeled down over top of him. I know she was hurt badly. All of a sudden, a lot of people started running and screaming. And I was kneeling over him and talking to him. He didn't answer me.
Well, we decided to have an open coffin at the funeral.
Because we knew that kids hadn't had many experiences that way. We wanted them to see what used to be Jeff Collum in the condition that funerals bring about. He didn't look like himself. We put a photo of him beside. We wanted them to know what could happen to a 19-year-old in the middle of a summer's evening. And we hoped that they'd think about it and remember.
It's amazing how bad the body gets bounced around and how bad it gets tore up inside a car. And these drivers, the ones that take that drink, that take that extra drink and think that they're okay, that they can drive home and then run someone off the road, run into someone, they're never forced to look at, the bits and pieces, the broken body parts, literally people torn apart that we have to pick up in pieces and put into bags.
And people screaming, so I think I got up and had left.
Jennifer helped us pick out the house and spent the day. All she talked about was the new house. She was going to ride her bike. I made her wear bright red pants, and John had put a flag on the bike as well. I felt there was something wrong. I heard ambulances and police cars and sirens, and I don't know, you can call it mother's intuition, whatever you want. It's a pretty bizarre concept, but I knew that it was Jennifer. And I called the police. They didn't call me, I called them and asked them who was in this accident. They said, describe your daughter. Before I even described her, I knew that it was Jennifer. I did describe her. They said, get to the hospital. But never in our wildest thoughts ever conceived of what we were about to experience. A large over 6 foot doctor, very, very large neurosurgeon came in. He said, didn't mince any words with us. He said, we asked, how was our daughter? Can we see her? And he says, I have something to tell you. And this is like the worst moment in our lives, was this man to look down at us and say, your daughter's neurologically dead. I screamed. I grabbed onto him and I said, you're lying to me. This can't be true. I turned to John and his face was white and his eyes were black. I said, John, this is not real. Something's happening here. And he looked at me and we both knew that it was true. We went in, and unfortunately they had, and I don't think it was insensitive on their part. I think they were just doing the maximum they could to save this child's life. She was lying naked on a stretcher, just naked, and they were pumping air into her by hand. It took about 10 hours then for her body to die. We felt her leave us. One of the worst feelings was to leave this hospital at 4 o'clock in the morning, walking down this long hallway, hearing our feet clicking against the concrete floors that they have in these hospitals, and the walls being so white, and leaving Jennifer in this little white bed and knowing that we would never see her again, not wanting to go, just pulling at us, but at the same time knowing that our whole life had changed. It was misting outside, the lights were all on the pavement, we were totally alone. Also, at that same time of loneliness, feeling anger because we had found out just a few hours before that Jennifer's death was not just an accident, a twist of fate. It was actually caused by an impaired driver, someone that had been drinking all weekend, as a matter of fact, and had hit her from behind.
Well, he was charged with criminal negligence causing death and driving well over the legal limit and hit and run. He was acquitted on the hit and run because the bus driver did get him to come back. He was convicted on the other two. Now, the conviction on the criminal negligence causing death means that you have to prove a wanton disregard for human life. In Canada, the maximum sentence for that is life. Now, he was given 2 years less a day, and from what we've been able to determine through contacts, is that of that he served 3 months in a provincial institution and 3 months on weekends. He was never given a fine. He was never given any counseling for alcoholism. He was giving a 2-year license suspension, so he had his license back now for 3 years. And as far as we know, he has never been given any kind of counseling for drinking and driving. It's just not something that has to be done, and it's not done.
It was his second offense.
It was his second offense, that's right.
That's the problem. That's the problem with the system right there, is that nothing was done to avert him from being back on the road. And it's very difficult to stand up here and tell all these things and pour it out. But unless someone does, how is anyone to know?
I said to myself, I gotta get up and go to the police and report the accident. I tried to go upstairs, and it's just like someone's choking me.
Back in the spring of 1983, this office investigated a single car motor vehicle fatality, which ended up in the deaths of 3 young persons. About 1:30 in the morning when I got the initial call, and as I came upon the scene, all I saw was a light post with what appeared to be just a pile of rubble beside it. And I got within about 500 feet, and I started to realize exactly what was there. I could recognize the car just by the taillights as being a Corvette. But basically what had happened is that 3 young teenagers, 2 were 17, 1 was 19, were at a party. They had been drinking. Investigation revealed from a number of witnesses that the vehicle was northbound at quite a high rate of speed, approximately 160 kilometers. It started to go sideways and struck the side of the street light. They were dead at the scene, and the female died shortly thereafter. The vehicle itself was just totally demolished. The transmission, the engine, we found that about 50 feet away from the vehicle. The frame was ripped apart, and there were just bits and pieces scattered all over the place.
Received a phone call from a police officer. He said to me, he says, "Don't move." He says, "I come and pick you up." I didn't care what happens to me because I know what I'd done.
I remember my friend, the guy that was in the bike in front of me, he turned around, he said, "This guy means business." And what happened, I guess he had seen him from a long way off coming down our lane, and we would pull into the opposite lane, he would pull into the opposite lane. We would come back into the other lane, he would, no matter where we went, he followed us, just like he was out to get us. And my God, it's a terrible feeling when you're sitting on a motorcycle and there's really nowhere to go. I mean, a car would be bad enough, but a motorcycle is even worse. It's a hell of a feeling, believe me. My injuries were, I had cuts to my face, my forehead, this hand was broken. This arm, I've got to go for plastic surgery. There was a piece of meat ripped out of this arm. All the ribs down this side were broken. My pelvis was separated in 3 places. I lost my left leg. My right leg was all smashed up, and then I had to, the bone wouldn't heal. I was in the hospital, I forget how many months, with this bone stimulator on it, and it finally did work, but it was tough because I had to have it on every night, and it finally did work. OHIP didn't cover it. I had to pay that myself. As far as the insurance, I've got absolutely nothing. And when I will get anything, who knows? You hear about it on the TV, and you read in the papers, and these guys that have been, 5, 6, 7 times they've been charged with impaired, and there's nothing done. There's absolutely nothing done. And what do? They take their license away for 3 months and slap their wrists and give them a couple $100 fine. That's a joke. Because when it's all over, they let them out of jail, if they even go to jail, and they can start life all over, like nothing ever happened. Meanwhile, I got to go through this for the rest of my life.
All I remember is a person sitting on my left. He says, "Okay, it's all over." He says, "Stand up, we have to go." So I stood up, and he says, "Give me a hand." And I knew. He put the handcuffs on me.
What I was told happened through the police reports was that a drunk driver was traveling in the opposite direction as myself, crossed over 3 lanes, and hit my car while I was proceeding to work.
When I went in to see him, he had both his eyes were swollen almost beyond belief. One was blue and the other was a pinkish red. And he had everything at that point was in traction while they waited to operate on it. His right arm, his right leg, his left leg. He already had his cast on his left leg. I think when I went to see him, it was about all I could do just to stand up.
And it ended up at about the 2.5 or 3 year mark that my wife got so fed up with me that she moved away. And we became separated because she just couldn't take it anymore. Friends were saying to me point blank, look, forget it. Just forget it and try and live like normal. And I couldn't forget it. People don't look at you as being sick. They think you're okay.
Even the doctors he saw, though, like the one psychiatrist that said, you've got to forget about it. The thing is, you can't forget about it because you live with the pain and you have financial and physical and mental hardships that are there every day. When you wake up, you start getting out of bed and you remember, oh yeah, that hurts. Like you're okay, and then as soon as you start to move or to try to do something, oh yeah, that hurts too.
Painkillers don't always work, and the ones I've got are pretty strong.
The more you take, the less they work.
And so I try and avoid taking them, but I take maybe, it's hard to say, maybe 30 tablets of 292s a month.
We've got to change social attitude about drinking and driving, that it's not an accident. Right now, it's viewed, when someone causes an accident, if they're drunk, it's an accident. To me, it's negligence.
I had a sign put on my wheelchair, and it reads, I owe it all to a drunk driver. And as long as it's not happening to them or anybody close to them, just let it go, because look at all the money we'd lose if we jump on these, we'll say these hotels and stuff like that. And all they're doing is encouraging these people to stay longer, drink more, make more money, and then they leave there. Christ, if a cop wanted, he could sit outside these hotels and pinch damn near everybody. Damn near everybody.
When they came there, they put me in the cell, and that's my place. I wanted to stay forever. That's my feeling. I didn't want to see anyone. I know I'd done a terrible thing.
My main responsibility as a provincial coroner is to establish why the accident occurred, what the cause of death was, and what might have been done to prevent this type of an accident.
I decided to become a model because I wanted to learn different aspects of the fashion business. I was doing, fashion magazines, catalogs, still posters for subways. I was modeling mostly out of Toronto. I just started a bit in Montreal, and then I was going to Japan. In Japan, I was going to start doing commercials. I just brought all my stuff in from Toronto, so I had to pack my clothes up, running around like crazy, getting everything organized. And we headed for the airport. What I remember is hearing a terrific smash. It still bothers me hearing that sound. And falling forward in my seat. And I wanted to get out of the car, but I couldn't move. So my boyfriend got out, and the doors were jammed. Our car was shortened by about 4 feet, so everything was crushed. So he got out, and we waited and waited, and finally the police came. They couldn't get me out of the car because my door was jammed and there was a gas leak. The problem was they needed flares, and they had problems getting flares, so every time a car would come, it was heading right for us, and I could hear it, and everyone would run from the car, and I was just stuck in the car waiting. It was horrible, just waiting and waiting for someone to come. My injuries, I'm called a C5, C6 level. That's where the injury took place in my neck. The vertebrae were smashed, so they took a bone from my hip and fused it into my neck.
I was in traction with a metal halo for approximately 3 months. I'm pretty well paralyzed from below the arms down. I have partial movement in my arms. No movement in my hands, no sensation in my hands. I have to have people to do everything for me, scratch my nose. Silly little things like that you take for granted every day. And just being in an institute, you don't have your freedom. And the fact is, I'll never really have my freedom again. There isn't a day that goes by that I'm not totally depressed and angry for what's happened. And sometimes I think I've accepted and it's okay and I'll work hard, but then I think about going out dancing and things, and I just want to wake up from this. It seems like a nightmare, and you know, I haven't accepted the fact I'll always be like this.
I was so ashamed for everyone I knew. Now all I wanted to do is stay dead. I didn't want to get out of the cell.
In this particular situation, my wife and I were alone at home. The telephone rang at 2 o'clock in the morning. And to me as a coroner, the only people who call me at 2 o'clock in the morning are the OPP to tell me that somebody else is being killed. When we arrived there, we found a small Honda automobile. And it had been run into, almost head-on, by a drinking driver. Interestingly, the drinking driver was not hurt at all. His car was in the ditch. And there was this Honda sitting there that was cut off from the dashboard forward. And there were 2 girls dead in that automobile. We started to try to find out who they were. We have to identify the body before we can start an autopsy and find out why they died. And the only way to identify the body is from the personal effects. The car was cut off. There were clothing, wallets strewn all over the place. And so we had to start to try to identify these girls from the little pieces of paper fluttering about the road. And the first thing we picked up was a Chargex bill. And there was a Chargex bill for a child's bicycle. Then we found hydro receipts. And suddenly it started to dawn on one that this piece of inanimate meat was a living person a few moments ago. She was a young woman with a child who had just had a birthday, 4 years old, and she'd bought him his first bicycle. Every one of these people that we pronounced dead beside the road is a real, live individual, has a whole life in front of them, and it's snuffed out in 1 minute for nothing. For what? For one more beer. Is it really worth it?
Many nights I'm awake. I'm still praying for these 2 boys. I know one died and one is still alive. I don't think I ever forget what I've done.
It was about 7:30 in the evening, and I was at home on my own, and I received a telephone call from Neil's friend John, and he said, "Mrs. Gray, Neil's been hit by a car." And I said, "Oh dear." I said, "Is he badly hurt?" He said, "There's a lot of blood." And I said, "Have you called an ambulance?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, just stay there," I said. And I put down the phone and I called John, who was in another part of town. And I said to him, "Come quickly because Neil's been hit. He's been in an accident." And I said, "I won't move, I'll stay in the house." And John said, "Okay, I'll be right there." And you came?
Yeah, I was with Paul at the time, and as soon as I got the call from Ruth, I said, "Come on, Paul, let's go quick, Neil's been hit." And we got in the car and we raced home, and about a 2 blocks from where we are right now. We saw the road was blocked off with police cars, the ambulance was there, and everybody was just standing around. And I knew that it was something very serious because everybody was just standing doing nothing. And we walked over to where it had happened, and one of the ambulance drivers grabbed me and said, "Don't go any further." And I looked over and I saw Neil lying on the ground, and he was dead. And I said, "Has anybody told Ruth yet?" And they said, "No." I said, "Well, I want to do it." So I got back in the car and I came home, and Ruth was at the front door with her coat on, ready to go out. And I said to Paul, "You better sit in the car, Paul." And I walked up to the front door and I just shook my head, I guess. I don't remember exactly what I did. And Ruth said, "No, it can't be possible." I said, "Yes, Ruth, it is." And we came in, and I guess we, sort of went to pieces at that point.
And I just couldn't believe that Neil, who'd been there an hour before, and before he left us, before he left me, he kissed me twice at the door, and he said, "Tell me you'll see me again," or "Tell me you'll see me later," his last words were. And I couldn't believe he'd said those words. I can't really describe how we felt. It's a feeling, you feel everything and that you're numb, you don't feel anything, but a million things go through your mind. And one thing that really hurt me was that he couldn't be touched. I realised that from the point of view of the accident. He couldn't be touched, but it was a very cold evening, and as a mother, all I could think of was my child lying in the cold, and I really wanted to hold his hand, but I couldn't. And that was something that lives with me all the time.
The feeling that I had was that somebody had taken an axe and just given me 2 great big chops right around my middle somewhere, and there was a whole big chunk of me just gone. And I, like Ruth says, you just feel absolutely numbed and devastated. You feel so hopeless. There's absolutely nothing you can do. It's over. It's finished. And we believe right now that there should be more of a deterrent. We feel that perhaps the fines and jail sentences that are being handed out by our judicial system is not really deterrent. An average of $350 for a first offence of impaired driving is certainly no deterrent. When we go into high schools giving our presentations, we ask the question, how many people here today could not come up with $350 if they really had to? And a majority of high school kids could come up with $350, so I think you can see what I'm getting at.
If it was up to me to try to convince people to not drink and drive, people that, when they are convicted of impaired driving, I'd like to have them on a fire department for a day or two on the truck that's running motor vehicle accidents, and to make them work beside us, stand beside us, and take a look at the damage that they do. Take a look at how these people are hurt.
From the time when this beautiful young man at 19 years old was snuffed out in seconds by the irresponsible actions of another human being, that we cannot stand. And we will fight as long as we are able to do anything.
It happens every day, and it don't take any brains to see that that our system is not working. People are getting killed and maimed every day. And what the hell's done about it? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's a goddamn joke. Like 4:30 in the afternoon or 5 o'clock, whatever it happened on a Saturday afternoon, the sun was shining. Christ, I had a T-shirt and jeans on and my cowboy boots, and I'm going fishing. And Jesus Christ, this has got to be 1,000,000 to 1 shot where a drunk comes down the goddamn 4-lane highway, it hits me head on. I mean, my God. And the thing is, it wasn't his first time. It was his third time. So it just goes to show you their goddamn punishment, or whatever the hell you want to call them, ain't working.
You're given the right to drive, and then once you're impaired once, you shouldn't get away with it again, because it only takes one time to do what happened to me. And I was hoping it would be a lot stricter than it is.
We're hoping, and I believe that when people see a film like this, that when they have a drink in their hands and they're thinking of driving home, maybe they'll lay their keys on the table.
If we can get across to people, if we can talk primarily to young people who have the rest of their lives in front of them, and say, this happens every Friday night, it happens every Saturday night, it's going to go on happening no matter what we do. But let's try to make sure that it isn't you that is dead in the ditch next Saturday night when I have to get up.
Most people don't understand what alcohol does to them. Everyone thinks, oh, I'm okay, I can drive better when I'm drinking. That's bullshit. Your reflexes, tunnel vision, everything else, I done it. I knew many times I drove, I had to close one eye to see two lines, and I still said, I can drive.
I want to do my favorite impression for you. Drunk guy on the phone, calling home. Drunk guy on the phone, calling home. Okay. Oh, hi, hon. Yeah, I love you too, yeah. Listen, hon, get the kids off the driveway, I'm coming home.